Okay, we have about 5 more minutes before we're going to get started, so you have about 5 more minutes, but if you don't mind, we'd ask that you kind of come in and fill in these chairs up front. So again, 5. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Dan Dukewitz. I'd formally like to welcome you to tonight's Ripple Effect. We're really grateful that you came out here to support us and share in this wonderful special evening with us. So since this is our 6th Ripple Effect, there are probably quite a few of you who are already familiar with what this is all about. But there may be some new employees or guests who are just a little bit curious as to what Ripple Effect is. So Ripple Effect is a semi-annual TED-like event sponsored by Wavetronics, where employees and even sometimes consultants will work for about 6 months to prepare, plan, and practice inspiring, insightful, and amazing presentations. And they get to share those presentations with us tonight. So I am excited to introduce our speakers. All right. So, first up, our first presenter is Jan Ziegler with the power of suggestion. Jan came to us, a little bit about Jan. Jan came to us 7 years ago, with Wavetronics being the 12th company that he has been with during a 48-year career. He earned a degree in marketing from Florida State University and began his career in sales, selling everything from women's shoes, printing, direct mail advertising, electronic banking, telephone systems, carrier networks, disaster recovery systems, control room systems, and CCTV systems, to now radars. He met the love of his life, Nancy, by chance, and they have two grown children. Landon, a middle school principal in Cambodia, and Amy, a registered nurse in Melbourne, Florida. Nancy and Jan also have two lovely grandsons, Garrett, age 5, and Edward, age 1. Jan opened the Wavetronics Georgia office in 2014 and currently has a dual role as part of the market development team and as the regional sales manager for South Carolina. Have you ever taken a step back and to look at where you're at today? And have you ever wondered how you actually got here? Was it by chance? Was it destiny? Or was it a series of events that were presented to you? Have you ever wondered where you would be if those suggestions that were presented to you were simply overlooked? Think carefully, because others in your life can certainly change your life.
So sometimes I wonder, have I ever made a difference in someone's life? Something that I did that had an impact on someone else? It was a beautiful fall Saturday in Tallahassee. Our arch rival, Florida Gators, were in town. The whole town was closed. Except for a family shoe store where I worked. And I remember the owner of the shoe store telling me, "You need to go in and work today." There I was, 10 o'clock Saturday morning. I opened up the front doors, and there she was, a young mother with a 7-year-old daughter standing behind her. They came in and sat down. I sat down in front of them. The mother looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, but my daughter has a bad burn on her leg, and then I'm going to have to try her shoes on for her." I looked at her leg, and I rolled up the sleeve of my arm, and I showed her a burn on my arm that closely resembled the burn on her leg. She looked at me, reached out and touched my arm, probably to see if it was real. She lit up. For the next 2 hours, that little girl tried on about 20 pair of shoes. Her mother bought 6 pair, 3 that fit, and 3 that were too big that would probably fit next year, so she didn't have to come back and do this again. So have you ever wondered how you got to where you are today and where you would be if something had changed? For me, life became a series of ideas, recommendations that often put a direction change in my life. And many times it was a life-altering change. So as I think back to that day in Tallahassee, it never occurred to me until recently that where I am today could have been a result of suggestions made to me by others in my life, during my life. But I just couldn't see it. I was working on the day-to-day stuff of life, and I couldn't see the forest through the trees. But as everybody's story has its good, its bad, and its ugly parts, everybody's story also has a lion, a tin man, or a scarecrow somewhere in their lives. Someone that's been there to guide them and support them down the yellow brick road. I was blessed to have all three. I had friends, relatives, and mentors. Those who were in my life that helped shape who I am and where I am today. So what do you want to be when you grow up? How many times have we been asked that growing up? What do you want to be when you grow up? I wanted to be a football player, but I thought I was going to be a lot bigger than this. So there's lots of factors that come into play growing up. But is the power of suggestion a factor? And can it really change your life? So let's go back in time. Let's put together some pieces of a puzzle, my puzzle. How did I get here where I am today? He was a musician, and it's New Year's Eve. Where are you going to be if you're a musician and it's New Year's Eve? Meanwhile, his wife, who speaks little English, goes into labor. At that time, they didn't have the technology to determine if it was going to be a boy or a girl ahead of time. But they did know one thing, that that baby was going to be born New Year's Day, January 1st. So the nurses suggested to the mother, name the baby Jan. Mom, it was just a suggestion. Growing up, I received invitations from women's clubs, women's associations, women's colleges, and the Women's Marines. That one I almost took serious. So I wasn't big enough to play football, so what did I do? I played on the basketball team. Go figure. So I worked through high school, I worked through college. Most kids back then did. We drove used cars, we fixed them up. Driving back then, for some of you that don't know this, was really easy. It was simple. Rush hour was named rush hour because it was 1 hour. I actually played on the Little League baseball team. My father was the coach. He was also the personality of the family. And he was in sales. I graduated college and came home, and he suggested to me to go into sales. So I did. It was just a suggestion. I worked for a printing and direct mail advertising company. After a successful new product launch, I invited the 3 marketing guys and their wives out to dinner. It was the 6 of them and me. So they suggested that I invite the executive assistant down the hall, she was the HR executive assistant, to come with us, just kind of balance it out. I asked her, she went. 3 years later, we were married. That was 42 years ago. It was just a suggestion. I took a position in the marketing department at the bank. And while I was there, a friend of mine heard that Southern Bell was interviewing for sales positions and suggested that I go for an interview, which I did, and I was hired. And I left the bank, and I went to work for Southern Bell. We were the largest company in the world, the Bell system, and we were a monopoly as well. So in 1983, the government divested us, and some of you may remember the original divestiture, into two different organizations, competing organizations, AT&T on one side and the 17 Bell operating companies on the other side. Everybody had to make a choice on which direction they were going to go in. People were quitting, people were retiring. It was chaotic. I remember going into the office where I worked, and there was a handwritten sign over the door, and it said, the only difference between this place and the Titanic is they had a band. So I had a background in network design and digital conversions, and my manager suggested that I leave Ma Bell and go to AT&T, and for the next 10 years, I was with AT&T. Yeah, it was a suggestion. As the years passed, Nancy and I started a family. We have an amazing son, Landon, now a middle school principal in Cambodia, and a wonderful daughter, Amy, who's a registered nurse in a major trauma center in Melbourne, Florida. Now they each have families and made us grandparents. So we have a 16-month-old grandson, Edward, in Cambodia, and a 6-year-old, Garrett, in Florida. During this time, I had a major change in my life. I was raised Jewish. I was born into a Jewish family and grew up Jewish in Miami, Florida. At the age of 48, I converted to Christianity. Sometimes I wonder if that was a suggestion. After 10 years, I left AT&T. I took a position as a consultant in a consulting firm, and we moved to North Carolina. We were there for 5 years, and we were transferred to Atlanta. I then joined a team that did control rooms, and it was done as a suggestion, but I designed and sold control rooms to the transportation industry as a suggestion. 5 or 6 years later, I took a position with a CCTV company selling to the 7 southeastern states CCTV cameras all over the highways. It was a suggestion. And then 7 years ago, I interviewed with Wavetronics at the suggestion of a friend. Wavetronics is a big part of my story. It's been an adventure, to say the least. But I've learned, after 20 years of being in sales, and you're out there solo, I've learned how to work as part of a team. That was not easy for me, and for those of you that know me, know it wasn't easy for me. But being part of a team, I was able to do things that I hadn't done before. And I was able to work and share and communicate as part of a team, which I had never done before. And it reminded me of a saying from Martin Luther King, that we may have all come on different ships. Well, we're in the same boat now. It took a while, but I figured it out. I finally figured it out. And I developed an algorithm. Some of the engineers here will be excited about this. I developed this algorithm that finally let me see the forest through the trees. And by this, I realized that being part of a team, I can do anything, but I can't do everything. So what do I want to be when I grow up? Well, here I am today. In the blink of an eye, 48 years of working passes by. And sometimes I wonder, is this the finish line? No way, not me. Life is more than just reaching a destination. It's all about the journey. And for me, the journey continues. But working for 48 years also takes motivation, professionally and personally. Professionally, it's the challenge. Keeps me awake at night, but it really gets me going. And it's the competition. It's the competition that makes our company great, and it makes our products greater. After all, without Goliath, David's just a punk kid throwing stones. But for me personally, it's my family. Begins and ends with my family. More recently, it's my team. My team motivates me. And it's everybody that's here right now. It's the passion that exists in this room that motivates me. And it's the faith that you all have in me to go out and tell our story. So, sometimes when we look back at our past, we cast ourselves as the hero in the stories about our lives. And not for me. For me, it's the lion, the tin man, and the scarecrow in my life. Those are the heroes in my story. That's how I got here today. I was more like Dorothy on that yellow brick road. But I did learn a lot. I learned that I have a lot to learn. And it's taking the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of life and realizing that the secret to having it all is believing you're ready to. And that's my story. So, the next time someone makes a suggestion to you, think about it, because I did.
All right, thank you, Jan. It's awesome to think about. Well, you never know where life is going to take you, right? So it's awesome to think about being open to suggestions and the possibilities. So thanks again. Our second presenter is Leslie Benfell. To introduce Leslie, she grew up in Portland, Oregon, and her happy place is still the beaches and forests of the Northwest. She graduated with a BFA in interior design and has over 30 years of experience designing commercial projects and residences, working out of Park City, Salt Lake City, New York City, and Utah Valley. She has been a designer on a large variety of spaces: offices, banks, law firms, medical facilities, hotels, restaurants, casinos, residences, a yoga studio, a football stadium, a chocolate factory, and even a consulting interior designer for the Foundry building at Wavetronics. She also teaches the history of interior design and architecture at Brigham Young University. Married to Stanley Benfell for 33 years, she is the proud mother of Grace, Matthew, and Francis Benfell. Emotional armor doesn't protect you from anything, but gets in the way of everything. So what happens when you shed this emotional armor? This is the story of what happened to Leslie when she had no other choice.
'Cause I can see it, so tell the voice inside your head to believe it. I talked to God about you, He said He sent you an angel, and look at all that He gave you. You asked for one and you got two.
I want to invite you to remember with me what it's like to hold a little baby and feel the absolute truth of their infinite, unchangeable worth and value. I need you to hold that with you as we talk. As we go through life, we tend to forget about this value in ourselves and those around us from day to day. And to work around that forgetting, we take different stances. The one up, I'm better than you. The one down, I'm less than you. And when we remember that state, that truth, equal to take the one up stance, we have to be armored to prove that we're superior. And the one down stance also requires this emotional armor, a protective shell to protect us from what we fear around us. But when we remember and we're in an equal to state, we don't need any armor. So when I was a young designer just out of school, there was just one company I wanted to work for. It was a big international architectural firm, and they represented everything to me, success in my field, and to be taken seriously in a field where people are often not taken very seriously. So every chance I had, I'd go visit one of their branch offices and set up an interview. But what I didn't understand at first was that after each one of these interviews, a copy of my resume was being mailed to the main office in San Francisco. So about a week after an interview, I'd receive a letter of rejection from the branch office. And then, a week after that, I'd get another one from the main office. This happened over and over and over until I had a stack of rejection letters from my one dream job of success. Well, a little time goes by, and I meet my sweetheart, and we moved to New York City. He finds us a studio apartment on Fifth Avenue. And in New York, when you're looking for work, it goes through a third-party headhunter. And they set me up with a single interview. And believe it or not, it was with this same company. And they hired me on the spot. And they had just, as a bonus, moved to these fabulous brand new offices in Rockefeller Center. One up. Now, ever since kindergarten, my signature color is butter yellow. Can you spot me? So, I chose a butter yellow dress for my exit dress after my wedding reception, and it was kind of stylish, suity thing. And so my first week of work, I thought, I'm going to wear that dress to work. A little naively, now looking back. So I'm heading to the subway in my butter yellow dress, and a perfect stranger was walking towards me, and he gets incredibly close to my ear, and he whispers a single word, Muffy. Now this is a preppy endearment, short for muffin, seems harmless enough, but it was terrifying. The message was absolutely clear that I was in danger. It was so upsetting to me that I honestly did not wear yellow again for 20 years. It was the all-black New York uniform ever after. One down. Well, that first month working at our fabulous offices in Rockefeller Center, one of my coworkers is mugged and beaten in the building. The firm brings in a policewoman to talk to the women at the office because we're really upset. And she trains us a little bit about how to be in New York City. So there's a few rules. When you're on the street, you don't look anyone in the eye ever. You walk very briskly in a given direction, even if you're lost. And in your countenance, you craft a sort of angry, impatient, annoyed look to make you unapproachable so that you're not an easy target. So I take careful notes and I practice my street face. One down. Now, in the office, I'm a junior designer out of school about 2 years, and I find myself in a little bit of a Devil Wears Prada situation. And I employ a different kind of armor here. It's more of a stealth mode where I try to not be seen by the capricious and powerful ones above me. One down yet again. Wrong direction yet again. Here we go. So I practice my street face. Some time goes on, and I get really good at it. I look mean when I'm on the street. And this facade just seems to snap on the minute I step a foot out on the sidewalk. So I'm walking home from work one day. I'm full of my attitude, all in black. And I'm actually in a terrific mood. It's Friday. I'm going home for the weekend. But you would never know that. And another stranger sitting by the side of a building reaches out a trembling hand. And he points at me. And he says, "The darkest soul I've seen in New York City." I just keep walking. I don't have time for this. Inside, I'm just like exploding fireworks of joy. I could not have been happier. Leslie, one up. So we moved back to Salt Lake, and my New York one-up attitude gets me in a little trouble as I'm managing a small group of designers. The worlds were colliding, right? But things improve a bit when I have my first child, and this softens me, takes those New York edges off, and there's nothing like holding your own child every day to remind you of that infinite worth and to act accordingly in your life. So things were better. Then I got a new opportunity. This was for a large local architectural firm, and I was the first designer they had ever hired. So it's an office full of architects, and I don't know if you could imagine, there's kind of a hierarchy of architect to designer. So that one down scenario is feeling present as I'm making these preparations to start this new job. And I'm really nervous, and I'm really excited because it's a great opportunity. And I'm just consumed. I'm consumed with worry and stress about this opportunity until everything changes. Just 2 days before I started this job, I found out that a dear friend had taken her own life. And I was completely devastated by this tragedy. And I was in grief-stricken, heart and soul for many, many months. But then I realized something happened. Something else happened. And it's taken me many years and more than a few Brené Brown podcasts to understand. Brené Brown says, "The greatest barrier to courage is not fear. The greatest barrier is armor." So in my grief-stricken state, I had no choice but to start this new position completely unarmored. And this had the side effect of I began this work in an equal to stance. It turns out loss, too, can remind us in a dramatic way of the value of each individual. Well, this stance in the workplace became my new set point, and it changed everything. I'd always loved what I did. I always liked what I did, but after this, I began to love it. Everything improved, from my relationships to my coworkers, the quality of my work, and the joy I experienced at every stage of the process. Well, this equal to state was challenged at one point when I ran up against the one-up armor of a very talented and intimidating architect. And we were working together on a project for the first time. And after an uncomfortable client meeting, he called me gruffly into a conference room and gave me a little talking to. And as I was driving home that day, I was kind of processing what had been said. And I was trying to figure out, what's going on. And I realized this conversation could only mean one of two things. The first is that, we're in a somewhat frustrating situation together. The second is that I'm a talentless idiot. So I felt myself angrily searching for that armor, right? That one down armor. But the equal to stance held firm. The next day I went right in and I decided to talk to him about our conversation and find out which of these two things I was dealing with. And it took quite a bit of courage, I'm here to tell you, for me to do this. But I went into his office and it was now me who closed the door and said, we need to talk. And being the good man that he is, he just melted. And he said, oh, did I do that to you? And he thanked me for clearing this up right away and assured me that he had meant no personal slight on my abilities or opportunity to work together. And then he shared a story that has stayed with me all these years of a colleague of his who he'd only ever felt respect for, who came in to give him a talking to on this other gentleman's last day of work. And he berated the architect about all the slights and insults he had received over a 30-year tenure working with him. It was such a tragedy. If both of these men had been able to set aside their one up and one down armor, this needn't have happened. So, the good news is, you don't have to learn this the hard way I did, right? Start by just paying attention. Notice when you're armored, when you're feeling better than or less than. Notice when you're feeling equal to. And when you have enough courage, lay that armor down and see what happens next. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Leslie. I love the idea, the concept, and the story of how becoming vulnerable, right, improves your quality of relationships and your success and overall happiness. Thanks again. Our third and final presenter is Matt Brown with Running for My Life. Matt has been with Wavetronics for over 10 years and is currently the SMT manager. Matt has a bachelor's degree in technology management and holds an electronics technician license. He has been Wavetronics' first responder. He has a beautiful Spanish wife, 4 stepdaughters, 1 daughter of his own, and 7 step-grandchildren. He loves spending time with his family. Matt is quite the runner and has received various medals over the years doing so. He enjoys playing the guitar, drums, and creating music in his spare time when he's not running. In the summer of 1987, young Matt was traveling back to Denver, Colorado with his family after visiting Salt Lake City. And he fell asleep in the back seat, and his family and his life would never be the same. So please welcome Matt.
When I opened my eyes, I couldn't move. I was tied down to a bed in a room that I'd never before seen. As my head lay rested on the pillow, didn't feel right, and I realized that all my hair had been shaved off. I looked down at my feet, and there was this big black bar with 4 pins coming out of it that looked as though they were drilled into my leg. I looked at my other leg, and it looked like part of a Raggedy Ann doll, all stitched up together like something out of a horror movie. And then the pain in my body slowly started to resonate. I was 6 years old. I looked around for that one person that had always been there for me from the beginning. But she was nowhere to be found, and I felt completely and utterly alone. I remember that I had been traveling back to Denver with my family after a short trip in Salt Lake City, and that I had fallen asleep in the car. But I didn't expect to wake up in this place. It was like I was in some kind of nightmare. And then the reason we went to Salt Lake was because my mom wanted to show her friend and her children the Salt Lake Temple. And so I wondered too where my mom's friend was and where my 3 little sisters were and my little brother. It just didn't make sense. And then all of a sudden a bunch of people dressed in white barged into my room and started asking me questions and running tests on me like I was some kind of experiment. And I felt so uncomfortable because I was nearly naked and I didn't feel that I looked like a human being anymore, and all I wanted was my mom. Well, no sooner did I find out that I had been involved in a serious automobile accident somewhere in the middle of Wyoming, and that I had been sleeping in a coma for a whole week. My right leg was completely broken, and I had 213 stitches all over my body from the top of my head down to my feet. The doctors told me that everything was gonna be okay, but then it hit me like 1,000 bricks falling on top of me at the same time, and I suddenly realized why my mother wasn't there, and I did not have to ask. I knew that she had been killed in that accident and that I would never see her again, that I would never get to say goodbye. But I felt lucky though, because unlike my sisters, I did not have to watch as our mom lay dead in the distance and being held back by bystanders despite wanting to be next to her. My mom and dad had separated a year prior, and my dad was in no position to take care of 5 little children on his own, and so we were raised by my grandparents. At the time, my grandfather had just retired as an electrical engineer, and him and my grandmother were off traveling the world together at the time of this atrocity. Their trip was cut short, and they came immediately to our aid. There was a lot of talk about each of my siblings and I growing up with a different relative to lighten the load, but my grandparents wouldn't have it. They wanted us to stay together, and so they became full-time parents once again to a new family. The doctors believed that I would probably never walk or run or play sports again like a normal kid. And finally, 6 weeks after being in the hospital, I was able to leave Utah, and I would go back to my new home in Denver, which was my grandparents' home. I remember that my grandfather was pushing me in the wheelchair in the Salt Lake airport. And he asked me, he said, "Matt, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Grandpa, I want to play soccer. I want to build up my leg." Every night thereafter, I had to go through the excruciating pain of having my pins cleaned as to not get infected. And the first few nights I cried, but there was no way around it. I had to deal with it. And after a while, it wasn't so bad. It just became another part of life. I continued to go to physical therapy as often as time would allow. And I hated it because every time they'd make me take my clothes off. And I hate being without my clothes. Don't ever ask me to do it because I won't. Every time I fell, I just picked myself back up again. My uncle called me Map Man. And finally, 2 months after the accident, I was able to start walking or stand on my own and start walking. But I still had those pins in my leg. And it wasn't too much after that I was able to get those darn pins taken out. But the road was long ahead of me. Because I had missed a lot of the first grade, my grandparents seemed fit to put me back in kindergarten again to finish out the year. And so I became a held-back student. And finally, a year after the accident, a renowned doctor in downtown Denver wanted to see me. So my grandfather took me in. And upon arriving, the doctors and his staff and the other doctors round about were absolutely amazed that I could do the things that I could, for it was almost as if I had not even been in an accident. The only thing showing were the scars that I had all over my body, which I would refer to as my battle wounds growing up. So the doctors seemed no reason why I couldn't play soccer. So my grandfather got me enrolled on my first team. And I made it through my first season with my trophy, holding it proudly in my hands. From that time forward, any chance that I had to play sports, to run in marathons, or just run for fun, I embraced that opportunity because it made me feel free. But I didn't know how much running would prove useful until another life-changing event would come to me much later in life. After the accident, I always struggled in school. I had to be in a special reading class because I was behind all the other students despite being held back. But I loved sports, and I finished grade school, and I finished middle school, and I even graduated high school with a diploma. But I had no ambition to go to college. Not because I didn't want to, but because I felt that because of the accident, I wasn't smart enough. And so the years went on, and I was in and out of various jobs, and I got married, and my wife had a huge part to play in me getting an education. But even at that, taking a class here and a class there, I felt like I was never going to get there. And I had this constant voice in the back of my head telling me that I had failed in life because I couldn't get a degree like my friends or my family. The year 2017 was a pivotal year for me. Everything came together in my life, pointing me in the direction that I needed to take. That year started out, I lost 50 pounds in 5 months. And upon celebrating that victory, Wavetronics had undergone a change in their pay structure, and all of a sudden I was being told that no matter how hard I worked, that my bonuses and my raises would be getting smaller and smaller every year because of where I was at on the national pay scale for my job title. And this weighed heavily on me. At the same time, my stepdaughter came across a book that she felt inspired to share with me. And it's about a man who ran in the 2008 Olympics, who had a hard life growing up. But the point of the book was not that he became this world-class Olympian and was able to meet these amazing people and visit these cool places. It was that he made a promise to his mother that he was going to go back to school and finish his degree. And so he did. And I remember I was listening to this book while running the SMT line, inspecting boards and pushing them through the oven, just bawling my eyes out looking over my shoulder to make sure nobody was watching. But I thought to myself, if this guy can do it, then I can do this. So I went to go find out just what it would take. And I was looking at 2.5 years if I went full time, spring, summer, and fall. And it was right there that I made the decision that I was going back to school and nothing was going to get in my way. And it didn't matter if all I got was C's in all of my classes. The only thing that mattered was that I did the very best that I could. And that was my philosophy. Spring semester 2018, first day finally came. I had a headache for the first 2 weeks. I couldn't sleep. A typical day, I would wake up early in the morning, go to work for 8.5, 9 hours, come home, go to school, get back from school, and then I would go on a run for 4 miles. It usually take me between 30 and 35 minutes. After that, I would hit the books till 11 or 12 at night. On the weekends, I was up till 4 or 5 in the morning doing papers, writing papers or doing projects. And finally, that first semester came to an end. I hesitated to open my eyes, but I finally conjured up the courage to do so. And to my astonishment, I had received straight A's in each of the 5 classes that I had taken that semester. I now had an associate's degree in the palm of my hand. But don't think for a sec that that tempted me in quitting. Oh no, I went there for a bachelor's degree and that's what I was going to get. And so I kept going. And I thought to myself, well, I can get straight A's. I'll just keep going. And so the next couple of semesters went by and I got straight A's again in each of those semesters. And it seems that as time went on, the harder things got. Spring semester 2019, Wavetronics had gone to a split shift for the first time in its history in SMT. I became the line lead over that second shift. We worked from 2 in the afternoon to 10:30 at night most of that year. We built the most boards ever, and we put in much overtime. And I still went to school full time, and I still managed to get straight A's. And by the end of that year, I had friends, family, and coworkers that could see that I was pushing myself hard and struggling, and even suggested that I ease up a little bit, for after all, a degree is a degree. It doesn't matter how you get it as long as you have it. But for me, it was something more. I had to prove to myself that I could do it, and I had made it this far, and I was going to keep going, and nothing was going to stop me. Finally, that last semester came, spring of 2020, the year of COVID, where I thought was going to be a more easy semester, turned out to be the hardest of them all. I just did what I do best. I worked a little harder. I pushed myself a little harder. And I finished that semester with straight A's, and I graduated with a bachelor's degree, having a 4.0 GPA, something that I had never had in my whole life, something that I didn't think was possible. And I no longer had to listen to that stupid voice in the back of my head telling me that I had failed. And let me tell you how liberating it is not to have that. So I want to leave you with 2 messages this evening. Number 1, don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't do something. And number 2, don't let yourself tell you that you can't do something. Thank you.
What an incredible story. Matt, thank you so much for sharing and inspiring all of us to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. It's very impressive, and thank you very much again. That brings us to the conclusion of the presentations. There are a few shout-outs I'd like to give at this moment. So I'd like to thank Bonimus, specifically Alan Payne, for all the work that he's done to help put this together. Thanks, Alan, and all of Bonimus. The people behind the scenes, so the AV team, you have Stephen Bills, David, and Matt behind the computers and the camera. So thank you to them. We also have our presentation coaches, so Don, Josh, and Jen, who helped our presenters. As well as the Ripple Effect team. So that's Marcy, Jason, and Jeremy. Thanks, Marcy, for everything that you do to help put this together. Last, we want to bring up our presenters one more time. Jan, Leslie, Matt, come on up here. Give them a round of applause, you guys. We have a special plaque for each of the presenters. So Marcy, do you want to present them? Okay. All right, thanks again, you guys. All right, and the last thank you is to all of you. Thank you so much for coming and making this such a special evening, and participating. So you're welcome to stick around and mingle. We've got dinner and dessert hors d'oeuvres, and we'll see you in 6 months. Thanks again.